over to you. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. All right. Orly, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, I can do that. So again, thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to get to know you. We feel privileged and honored. I'm Orly Haim, and I've been in the area of teacher training for quite a few years. I used to be a teacher counselor in the Ministry of Education in the area of language teaching. I work at Bedbury College of Education, which is a teacher training college, as a pedagogic advisor. I'm also the vice dean of the Faculty of Education. I also work at Tel Aviv University, also as a lecturer in the area of teacher training, language teaching methodology, and teacher knowledge. My areas of research are teacher cognition, language teacher cognition, more specifically, teachers' knowledge and beliefs, and language policy, and also multilingual acquisition like second, third, fourth languages, etc.
Okay. Thanks, Orly. So I'm Daniel Portman, and Orly used to be my boss at Beit Burl, and where I also served as a pedagogical advisor for several years. I then moved on more into the area of English for purposes of international communication. But as part of that, I was on a committee that developed a new teacher training program for tertiary level teachers. In Israel, it was decided to align with the CEFR, with the action-oriented approach to learning. And so we developed a hybrid program, and I think some 500 teachers or so have taken this course. So we're very, very proud of that. So starting with my roots with Orly and moving on to the tertiary level in terms of teacher training. I come, like Beverly, from the SFL world, which, as we know, have kind of we've interacted as systemic functional linguistics and LCT, became very fascinated with LCT when it just started, and was very, very happy to team with Orly to look at some of the data from our students when we actually taught together. So, Orly, would you like to
Yeah,
begin?
I can get started. Do you want to pass on the slides, or should I do that?
I'll do the slides. I'll do the slides for you.
Okay, okay. So, as Daniel said, there was both of us worked as pedagogical advisors. Just to give you some, I would say, some background about the context of EFL pre-service training in Israel. Um, Students, I mean, it's possible to obtain a teaching diploma either at the university or at a teacher training college. And students at the colleges, they usually study towards a multi-age track. In other words, we train them to become teachers of both primary and secondary school teachers of English as an international language. And our study was actually in the last phase of the pre-service training in the third year. They usually study 4 years. Now we're actually in the process of reform, transforming it into 5 years, by the way. But at that point in time, students studied 4 years, and in the fourth year, they did the internship and also a few more courses. English is taught as the first foreign language throughout schooling, officially from third grade, but because of parental pressure, etc., in many schools they start the learning of English in grade one and even in the kindergarten. At the same time, we have a crisis where there's a shortage of English teachers. Okay, Daniel, so maybe we'll move on to the first slide.
Mhm.
So the major problem in the area of pre-service or the learning to teach process is this disconnect or between theory and practice. I mean, this whole question of the extent to which student teachers and then teachers are able to implement all the theories and approaches they acquire in their pre and also in their in-service programs has always been a question. We also know from research that teachers have their own mental models about what learning is, and they're influenced by their previous language learning experiences and I would say other theories. They have their own theories, they have their own espoused theories. We also know that sometimes their theories and their beliefs are kind of, there's like a discrepancy between their theories and their beliefs. And we were kind of interested in the students' learning to teach process, or in other words, in their ability to implement the knowledge, the skills that they acquire at the college. We do a lot of, at our college, there's like a language teaching methodology that goes hand in hand with the practicum experience. The pedagogical advisor observes them. They also go to schools in groups. We work according to the PDS model. And so they do a lot of reflection, a lot of work with their mentor teachers. And at that point in time, we taught this didactic course or language teaching methodology is usually given at the college. And at that point in time, it was decided to meet every other week at the college face to face and to have asynchronous sessions and encouraging the students to discuss theories or issues emerging from their practical experience. And Daniel and I were interested in their ability to sort of make the connection between what they study in the courses and the practicum. And also we wanted to know what are the sources of their beliefs and their learning learning, because we know from research that teachers learn from their cohorts, they learn from their pedagogical advisors, they learn from their students at school, they learn via their own independent work. So we also were interested in that, and most importantly, the issues that they were concerned with. We wanted to know what issues they were concerned with at that point in time. So these two research questions guided our study. What are the main concerns of EFL teachers in the final stage of their teacher education program? And at that point in time, they did the practicum in secondary schools. Secondary schools in Israel are usually from 7th to 12th grade. In 12th grade, they usually take a matriculation exam, which is considered a high-stake exam. And according to the grade of that exam and another exam, which is equivalent to the SAT in the States, we call it the psychometric exam, they can get accepted to the university. And the second question that guided the study was, when pre-service teachers discuss critical incidents in an online asynchronous forum moderated by a pedagogical advisor, what kind of joint knowledge construction might we find? Okay, we conceptualize this group as a community of practice in which they negotiate ideas and learning theories and discuss them and gradually develop them with the facilitation of the pedagogical advisor. Can move on. So our study included, I think there were about 20 more cohorts in my group. In Daniel's group, there were also 20, altogether about 40 cohorts. As I mentioned, it was a year course running from, I would say, October till June. And the meetings were held every other week face-to-face at the college, and then every alternate week online. And we gave them specific guidelines for sharing their critical incidents. Critical incidents are incidents that drew their attention while they were at school. And an incident that made them think about their teaching or about learning a language, and made them change an aspect of their beliefs or knowledge about that particular issue. So we guided them, and we asked each student to present a case study, and we gave them some guiding questions, asking them to give some background information that their classmates needed to understand in order to be able to respond, and sharing the rationale for choosing this particular case study. And we wanted them to find a way to present their study. We encourage them to use text, but also visuals, videos, and photos if necessary, or learning outcomes. Snapshots of learning outcomes. And we also wanted them to sort of specify the kind of question, that the issue that they were concerned with. What would you like your classmates to address? What exactly do you want us to discuss? And students were also asked to respond. So we also gave some guidelines. So I would say more general guidelines. These are like general guidelines. What is your response? What recommendation could be made beyond the answer to the question? What insight have you identified for your own future practice? And again, presentations could take any format in addition to the text.
At this point, if we'd like to give them maybe a few minutes, we actually have two such kind of exchanges in the handout. We don't need to read it to you, but perhaps just a few minutes. Would that be helpful for people to get a feel of the data?
I think that we just need to tell everybody that there's a little handout right at the top of the chat where Daniel and Orly have prepared something. So just move to the top of the chat, but maybe you can talk through it while people have a look, Daniel.
Sure. Oh, I have to acknowledge that the meeting is being recorded. Right. So is the screen still showing? Because I switched screens.
It is showing, and it is showing your examples, but if I could ask you to just make them bigger so that
Sure.
that's great.
So yeah, so this is really very much what our kind of data analysis looked like, and the questions that Orly mentioned here are here in bold. And one of the things we kept thinking a lot about the resolution of analysis, like when we read, for example, Lee's research, other research, etc. We sometimes see, even Dale from last week, we see a sort of sometimes a sentence by sentence analysis. And then what we found was when we did kind of sentence by sentence analyses, we we found ourselves being lost and not getting the picture. And I remember, Carl's statement from last week, and it really resonated with me, which he said, an entire lesson can be sort of plotted in terms of semantics. It doesn't necessarily need to be, a lot of times in our papers, we see people plotting different sections of the lesson, sometimes, down to the sentential level, as we saw. So what we kind of decided we would do is look at one's turn and code it in terms of what we saw it best represented. And we'll talk about the translation devices in a minute, but we just wanted to give you a feeling of the kind of texts that we were looking at. And this person here is discussing grammar, and then gives a very, very detailed kind of a description of what is going on, and why they brought it up. And if you kind of look at it, you'll see some of the SD parts of it. Grammar lesson, interactive, balance between teaching and reviewing, heterogeneous classes, rules, present perfect, sort of the jargon of the English language classroom. One other observation we did make was, of course, the word grammar lesson. That's a common sense word, let's say, but when used within the context of a very dense kind of text, the grammar lesson takes on the understanding of SD plus. And this person goes on and is, trying to figure out at the end, is there such a thing as teaching too many grammar rules, right? A beginning teacher comes with their arsenal of grammar rules. They've learned everything in their theoretical classes, etc. they want to know what the others think about that. And then we have the responder who, then carries on actually within the same quadrant, more or less, makes some recommendations. And then we've also got, sort of how they would take it into their own practice. So that's kind of the flow. This is an example. I believe we put, and then we've got the pedagogical response as well, which usually is a sum up. We'll see later on in the data what the pedagogical responder advisor generally tends to do in terms of quadrants. And what I was trying to say at the beginning is I believe we even have one more if you'd like to read on your own. So we've got 2 of these, and take these as handouts. You can kind of see if someone wants to write back to us and say, hey, I don't agree with your analysis. That's also great. Open to discussion. So is that okay in terms of kind of a general feeling for the data? Yeah? Okay.
I think we've got a general feeling for the data. So I think you will be showing us what do you regard as semantic density
articulation devices.
Yeah,
yes,
that's fantastic.
yeah.
But I think we've got a sense. Excellent.
A sense.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So let me just share with you the main issues, the main themes that recurred. So as you can see, classroom management was the main issue that the students were concerned with. How to deal with group work, what to do, how to make sure that students, listen to them, how to deal with the students who misbehave, mainly, how to sort of teach a lesson effectively without disruptions, etc. That was the main issue. And then all kinds of issues pertaining to language teaching, how to teach grammar, how to teach vocabulary. As Daniel mentioned, in Israel, the curriculum has been aligned with the CFR framework, and now vocabulary is one of our, I would say, it plays a central role in the curriculum. So there were a lot of questions about vocabulary, about grammar, about reading. So that's we termed this category language teaching. Another category was differentiated instruction, how to accommodate students at different levels, how to teach a class with different levels, how to make adaptations to the materials. So that was an issue. And the last issue was actually the perceptual role of the student teachers, because some of them felt that the mentor teacher was present in their classes. At the same time, they were expected to behave and act like real teachers. Also, I mean, their perceptual role in terms of how the students themselves perceived them. So I mean, there were many issues. Another issue that is relevant here in the sense of perception has to do with the student population. The Israeli population is very mixed. We have Jewish and Arab students. Many of our Arab students teach in Jewish schools because of the shortage of teachers. By the way, our college, our teacher education college, is a binational college consisting of Jewish and Arab students. And research shows that sometimes the culture plays an important role. Another issue is that we have lots of immigrant teachers coming from all kinds of countries who didn't grow up in Israel, and the education system is not familiar to them. So this is also an issue. So all of these issues played a central role in terms of the themes that were addressed. And now I'm giving the floor to Daniel, who's going to discuss with you how we analyze the data, how we utilized the legitimation theory to analyze the data.
Okay, so one of the main decisions that we made, in the literature we had seen SG plus, SG plus plus, SG plus plus plus. I think that's the most we've seen, and we would analyze and reanalyze and reanalyze, and what we felt that we were looking at trees and not a forest. So we went back and we decided on four sort of coordinates. So we've got SG plus and minus, ST plus and ST minus. We feel that it gave us the picture of what we were looking for, which was what is going on as these people are constructing their knowledge as this text is coming together, this text of various turns of sharing and reacting. And for SG plus, we operationalized, or the translation was a detailed presentation of a classroom example. I think this is the classic one that we've seen in other papers as well. And as you see, we've got 10th grade. We have the word 5-point English, which is even more specific. That means within the 10th grade, a specific class. The high school is named. We all know also, right, the minute we name a specific high school, there's all kinds of semantic baggage that goes along with that. A lot of meaning goes into that, a lot of context. 41, very large, more than the usual. And so we're getting a very detailed picture of what's going on. The very experienced mentored teacher. The truth is that things are so small, probably that's by saying it's the very experienced mentor teacher at X school, we even know which teacher it is. Most of the readers can guess even that. And then this issue, which is being turned. So this is what we saw this kind of thing as an SG plus. And then SG minus, less semantic gravity, was a discussion of a technique or tool or concept without reference to a specific classroom context. So we have these concepts such as, a behavioral learning contract and positive reinforcement can be referred back during the year, a way of helping to shape good behavior. Again, discussing what the goings on of a classroom and what could be applied to a classroom. So this was how we saw less semantic gravity. And SD plus, and in fact, that's interesting because I just realized I took it from the other example. So the words like L1, and again, the common sense term of teaching vocabulary. Yes, our question always was on the street was like, could I discuss this with a math teacher? Would the math teacher understand if I said they're using their L1? Probably not. Would somebody on the street? Probably not. And then you pair that with teaching vocabulary, and they're having to unpack this dense idea of, do we translate, do we not translate, do we allow translation into certain languages, not other languages, all of those kinds of things. Less semantic density, we define as allusion to or sparse mentioning of disciplinary concepts, terms, and approaches. Again, we have pseudo kind of terms, technology in the classroom. Well, that could be many things. It was also very vague. There are technical issues, age-appropriate material. Again, we thought if you discuss this with a math teacher, yeah, they would probably understand what you're talking about. We're not talking about very specific kind of language learning technology, or what it means, or specific levels like 5 points, 4 points, 3 points, as we saw before. So that was sort of our translation devices. What we then did is we kind of, once we had all of the different pathways that we found, we divided them into a couple of categories, into 3 main categories. And the first one, we called it moving from practice to theory. And we then mapped each of these. And here, I think it's it's quite an interesting one here, where we've actually got someone really talking about specifically what's going on in their practice, and then generalizing it. So perhaps it could be used in another kind of concept. And what's interesting is that we map the subjects. That's why Orly went through all the different subjects, and people are probably wondering, what does this have to do with LCT? And the truth is, it's quite interesting to see which subjects kind of got different paths. And here we've got language teaching, and I think it's quite obvious that when we come out, a teacher comes out, oh, I know all about the present perfect and the past perfect, and I know when to tell them to use it and they could use this kind of density and discuss it within their classroom, but then then it becomes, okay, so in a generalized sort of way, not in your specific situation, how would that then be, how would we look at it with less semantic gravity? again, feel free to stop me and to disagree or whatever. Whoever
Sorry,
you feel like.
Daniel, can I just ask a question? Can you go back for a
Yeah,
minute?
yeah, uh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So, you looked at those, you categorized your data into those four thematic areas. Is there one particular theme that you're focusing on now, or are you taking examples from all four themes?
Yes,
From
so
all
yeah,
kinds of things.
our
Yeah.
organizing principle, good. Yes, our organizing principle is kinds of paths that we saw.
Okay.
And the first kind, we call it moving from practice to theory.
Okay, so that could have
And now,
been
and
in
now,
terms of classroom management. It could have been in terms of the
yes, yes.
conceptions
Yeah.
This
of,
one was language teaching. What
all
was
right.
interesting is that for this path, it happened to be language teaching.
Because I think maybe if you could give us the categories and just the example, like you did now, that would also help, so that we can
Yes,
see that with the categories and with the
yes, yes.
examples.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah, yeah.
we're still in
And
the
if I
category of
may just add one more sentence, as can be seen, our conceptualization in the data analysis was actually that their knowledge construction was kind of embedded within these two intersecting continua, okay? Oh, the SG and the SD, okay? This is very important.
So
And
you
and the and
saw,
the and
sorry, so
yeah.
you saw these pathways in all of the four of the categories. Um,
not necessarily.
oh,
Not
okay.
necessarily. Yeah, that's what's kind of interesting where we see this sort of dense language, for example, being used while talking about a classroom situation. I'm teaching fifth point 10th grade blah 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 school, and I'm grappling with how to differentiate between the present perfect and the past perfect, for example, where we see that that's quite natural. These kids that when they were brought up themselves, there was lots of grammar talk. English was a lot of grammar talk, right? So this is quite natural for them to be able to speak about language at this sort of dense, sort of theoretical level, and then to move up, right? And then to be able to maybe talk, well, when we have these kinds of problems or these kinds of differentiations, we should do that. So that is what's quite interesting is the intersection of what was discussed and what paths we find those discussions. And here we find, something again, the very practical, the very common sense, prosaic kind of incident. And this is interesting because we hear this in terms of classroom management. And what did that sound like? It sounded like, parents telling stories. Oh, my kids were bad today, and what do I do with them? And, it's like one mom or dad talking to another mom or dad kind of thing. We did see it in differentiated instruction, actually towards the beginning when there probably wasn't much terminology there, but I'm noticing, what do I do with X? He or she doesn't understand, that kind of thing. And the role of the PST, I'm lost. Somebody told me to teach an extra class. What do I do? So these were framed in very practical kinds of terms when they brought it up. But what was nice is that we do see some movement, not a whole lot, but we do see, we do some movement of yes, that happened to me, and some use of some extra density in order to, some theory, bringing some theory, so that maybe the person in trouble feels I've just got to get it out in common sense terms, and maybe the other person is there saying, well, maybe maybe I can draw on something we've learned in order to handle it. Many times, again, where this is a bit condensed, the pedagogical advisor, which was me in this case, was always here. However, this also, I mean, if we show, there's also movement in terms of the students as well. It wasn't only pedagogical. In the paper, it's a little bit more detailed, but we do have both, because it was at least 2 or 3 or 4 turns, let's say. Is that all right? That kind of explanation is helpful? Okay. And then what we saw, which was interesting, this was again the role of the PST, of the pre-service teacher. Again, here I am in my trouble. Something happened, something practical happened. Somebody told me to do something. I couldn't communicate with the principal, etc. It's still sort of brought up. Yes, this sort of thing happens, and then we come across again, being able to perhaps theorize it and learn some kind of lessons from it. And I believe we're at our second category. So here, that was sort of like something happens, and to what degree does it become sort of theorized and decontextualized enough so that maybe we can bring it back to the classroom? I would say that would be the first category to summarize. The second one, we call it informed revisitation, and that's why there's this kind of a circle. And in the literature, as we know, when we see these waves, we're very happy when we see the waves, coming back and forth. And I believe that this more symbolizes this kind of thing or represents this. What we saw here, language teaching, predictably, again, they know their terms and they know how to discuss their situation. This was interesting. This was quite interesting because it's sort of almost a diversion away from the term, yet the student discussing something to the effect of this sort of thing can happen, but without the terms. What we did see was differentiation in terms of students being able to express themselves with the theoretical concepts. Yes, I understand. I saw what you said, but what I have to say, I'm going to kind of move us away from the theoretical, which was interesting, and then predictably back here. This, for example, in this case, this was classroom management. It's again, I'm in trouble. The same kind of classroom management we had before. We've got some kind of, generalization about it. And then somebody comes in towards the end, predicted probably me, plus another student. That's usually what this representative, meaning, okay, so what can we do about it? How can we revisit what happened to that person in a local situation, yet can we draw on some things that we've actually learned? Here we have the issue of classroom management, which was quite interesting. Some of the times, and we'll show you what happened in first semester and happened in second semester, but we start to see sometimes people being able even to express what is happening with theoretical terms. Yes, the localized concept, but it's not here anymore. It's here. And that was interesting. This was also, by the way, this is later on, I'm just looking at the notes, the role of the PST and teaching. So this kind of thing happening during the middle of the year, this sort of shift is interesting of being able to begin talking about it. Some people diverted, et cetera, might have gone back and then coming back to, yes, we can discuss this in theoretical terms. I'm not going to go through each thing. I'm just going to
sorry, can you go back again to that one?
Yeah.
Would you be able to give us like just a kind of an example of what that would look like in the empirical data? Have you got
yes.
something at your fingertips?
At my fingertips, I don't. I would be happy to send out the empirical data, but what we're looking at is the ability, for example, if we're looking at this particular one. So language teaching is predictable, as we said before. So that we said would be the kind of thing. But I would say, the role of the PST, what we saw more was things like use of more of the school and institutional language, right? Being able to describe their role as opposed to the specific roles of other things and the other teachers, for example, and not just I was asked to do this or somebody told me that. And so that's more the increase of that sort of thing, of that sort of phenomenon in terms of role of PST, I would say.
Okay.
Again, as I said, classroom management, maybe some sort of technique or something is named here already, or, some kind of behavioral understanding is named here already. And that'd be the difference.
If I may, I just want to add, I just want to add, if I may, that we also saw some development in their ability to conceptualize, mainly in the spring semester, in terms of the issues they discussed. And as Daniel is just showing, in general, this quadrant of SG plus and SD plus means that the students are able to use to conceptualize terminology that is specifically EFL taken from theory and link it to the situation, to the situated context of school and the particular issue that they are discussing. Okay, so maybe this will be more clear. For example, if they're just to give you an example, if they are talking about teaching vocabulary, so they were able to mention the kind of aspect of vocabulary teaching that they wanted to highlight. I don't know, it could be incidental vocabulary that is done in group work activities and also discuss what was actually happening in terms of the context itself and the issue that they wanted to discuss, whether it's group work or the learning or the actual learning process. I hope it's clear. So
What I can
actually,
also do,
each quadrant represent a different aspect of knowledge construction, and we can identify like movement um, mainly in the spring semester, in the cases presented in the spring semester.
if you want, you've on the handout, you've actually got two analyzed ones. I can add more if you want to kind of get a better idea and to see, what it the kind of analysis that we conducted. This is a classic example of what we talked about in terms of revisiting, and we were quite happy when we saw this sort of thing. It was actually the role of the PST, which is understandable, especially if we're talking about someone here. Let's say they ended up not using any theoretical concepts, but talking about their problem. Somebody unpacks it for them, or condenses it to them in terms of more of density. Again, we had a lot of people coming back to the less dense language and sharing stories. That could be the nature of the PSD of, oh my gosh, I was in that kind of situation as well. And then, of course, coming back to the theoretical. So it does map quite interestingly in terms of what was done and what kind of pathways we actually saw. And then finally, this one is a language teaching one, which is really, we see this later on, somebody beginning with very dense concepts. How does one do something in general? Again, we have many times the other person maybe has to unpack it for themselves, their own understanding. They have to say, okay, wait a minute, I know what you're talking about. Let me maybe in common sense terms talk about it and process it myself. Coming back again, somebody who this was also so interesting is how different people put their spin on it, right? This person saying, I can talk about that in general, but I can't use the terminology. And this person saying, I can use the terminology, but I need to anchor it back into what's going on. And then, of course, many times the teacher, the pedagogical advisor, ending in the more theoretical quadrant. We had one of staticity. They all just stayed there. Everybody stayed. This was about differentiated instruction. Evidently stayed in the same problem, stayed quite theoretical. Nothing, maybe felt that for whatever reason, this was a way, kind of circling around the issue, but it was interesting that we didn't see any change going on here. It happened once, so we thought that would be an interesting one to put as well. And then just to sort of look at some of the key issues. Orly?
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of I would say, conclusions, we could definitely identify, as I said before, some development in their knowledge construction process, and also in the themes that were prevalent. In the fall semester, classroom management, language teaching, and the students' perceptual role uh, uh, were prevalent themes. Whereas in the spring semester, by the way, in Israel, it starts in March, beginning of March. There was more emphasis on differentiated instruction, and also, trying to accommodate the learners. Like it was more towards a learner-centered kind of instruction, trying to accommodate the learners, which we interpreted to indicate a little bit of development in terms of their perceptual role and sense of agency. And in terms of the themes themselves, and of course, we also identify whereas in the fall semester, most of the issues were context dependent and was actually strong semantic gravity. In the spring semester, we could identify, I would say, I more inclination towards semantic density, more abstraction, and I would say deeper subject matter knowledge.
And if I can add also more of an outward focus. And a lot of the first ones we see, what do I do? I'm in trouble. And then later on, we see more of the kinds of things of, how do I accommodate what's going on with my students? I'm less in trouble myself, and I'm more secure with myself, and I'm able to handle and to think about what's actually going on with my students.
Okay, so in general, what we could, our own interpretation of our data, and again, taking into account that we're talking about 20 or 22 cases, and it's actually one group of cohorts teaching at different schools. These were our conclusions. So these critical incidents demonstrate a lot of fluidity and the dynamic nature of knowledge construction. They also demonstrate multiplicity of pathways, which highlights the context dependent, I would say the situated context, the subjective learning, and I would even go one step further, the idiosyncratic nature of learning. Okay. Students learn in different ways. They have different theories of teaching, and they probably and hence the learning to teach process is definitely different. We could see the practice to theory moves, which signal bridging towards cumulative knowledge, obviously, cumulative and also deeper knowledge. And again, informed revisitation, which reveals potential for deeper knowledge building, deeper and maybe broader. There were few complete tours, which suggest untapped potential for theory engagement. And the pedagogical advisors or course instructors in our data were really key mediators, steering pre-service teachers from practice toward theory and trying to kind of facilitate the learning process, giving them strength and the support on the one hand, and at the same time promote the knowledge construction. And we feel that the role of the pedagogical advisor is really conducive to this whole learning process. And in general, I think it would be interesting to see how teachers throughout their career, again, construct knowledge. And maybe there are, I would say, differences or development in their knowledge construction process.
Okay, so one of the things we thought, if we have a little bit of time, is that you do have two sets of data to look at in the handout, and to give some time to think about it, and also to think if any of the pathways that we spoke about might resonate with your own practices or your own observations. So we can give you a couple of minutes either to make some comments with regard to the data, or maybe to if somebody has already seen certain pathways that they would like to maybe revisit and look at and say that that sounds familiar to them.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Daniel and Orly. I think before we go there, I'm just wondering if anybody's got anything, ideas that they've got about this data. This data that you've got seems incredibly rich, and there's so much that one could do with it. You know, you've already started an analysis, but I think that you've got quite a number of publications that you could pull out of this. So I've got some ideas on that, but I was also wondering, um, what other people are thinking. Gavin, would you like to come in? You've got some ideas there.
Yeah, I apologize. I've got two monitors, so I've got the profile, the paths on the other screen. It kind of leads into, Daniel, what you were just going to ask about what we see. So I'm a teacher educator, and I'm familiar with Steve's stuff around reflection and semantic waves. I was looking at like the path 6, 7, and 9, where they never go above that kind of
Yeah.
semantic gravity midline. So they're very context dependent. And I wondered, I know Orly's just mentioned this a little bit, that they seem very context bound. We see that quite a bit in reflection, but I just wondered if you could unpick those for me a little bit. Orly, you just start to say that maybe that was an opportunity for expanding kind of engagement with theory, or those more complete tours I think you talked about. Sorry, I've probably garbled there. So yeah, there seem to be a number of moves that were really heavily context bound. They
Yes,
never kind of
yes.
Right.
moved into theoretical
Right.
discussion.
Right. I forgot.
So
Sometimes we
yeah, my
we
question really was, is it that a product of how the discussions were structured? Is it just where those students are at in terms of seeing everything through the lens of their immediate context or that reflective moment?
Orly, do you want to say anything first, and then I'll add, or I
Yeah,
can?
listen, I
Okay.
think in general, the students were actually free to choose any topic they wanted. We actually never limited the topics. It was actually their choice. And each semester they came up with their own topics. Their cohorts responded to their questions, and sometimes they added. So in general, as I explained before, I mean, in terms of this particular path or tour, as we called it, the idea is that the students move from, I would say, a typical context embedded case. For instance, if I take I don't know, how do I teach vocabulary while I was tutoring, for instance? I repeated this word so many times, and the students still made some spelling mistake. It's a very technical, very practical, to I would say a more theoretical, more the a case that include a presentation of a case and a discussion, a complete discussion, because we actually treated each case together with the responses as one particular unit. We looked at the entire case, including we even counted the number of words. Sometimes we really looked at and a case that included reference to literature, reference to I would say theories, along with detailed description of the context. By the way, even for the context, they also learned a lot of theories about dealing with students and how to do. We refer to their ability to give a comprehensive, detailed description of their case that is linked to the theory as well.
If I may add,
Am
the
I clear?
questions were not.
I can give
I'm
examples,
sorry.
of. By the way, we kind of triangulated the data. We observed the students. I mean, we never analyzed we analyzed the lessons differently, not according to the to this particular system, but we observed the students. We saw a lot of, a lot of learning outcomes. We spoke with them. We had a lot of reflection sessions, so we could. When we analyzed the data, we also related to this particular information as well. I
One of the
hope
things
I'm clear. Clear? I think it's clear. Is it clear, Gavin? Have I answered the
Yeah,
question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot more insight into the data. I guess I was curious really that if this was a wave, it'd be a low wave.
It it
Mm.
would. And by the way, the questions were not informed by LCT research. These questions were formed way before the various Steve and Lee, et cetera, started thinking about, oh my gosh, the questions are probably not helping to promote the wave, and why don't we rethink the questions? This was done before that. This is and of course, one of the things is let's think about the questions again, but we also think that the role of the pedagogical advisor is someone who's kind of monitoring. I know there's the research now on wonderful research on the AI, kind of looking at the answer, can you go up a little bit, et cetera. But we do feel that some scaffolding um, would be needed, at least in our local context. I'm not 100% sure that just tweaking the questions would bring them, into sort of the less semantic gravity.
So can I just add a thing here? So Gavin, you're quite right that in terms of the semantic gravity, this would probably be a low semantic flatline if you were just looking at semantic gravity.
Right.
But it looks to me like it's waving in terms of the semantic density quite radically. So your semantic density profile is very different to your semantic gravity profile.
Yes.
But
Yes.
because I wouldn't actually have a problem with this kind of pathway as being problematic because, you know, it's different to when you're doing kind of a theoretical course or an
Mhm.
education studies lecture or whatever or discussion where you're speaking in very general terms in very abstract theoretical terms, but you're not linking it with the classroom. Here, you're staying in the classroom context and moving around in terms of, okay, what am I experiencing and what kind of professional judgments am I making and so on. So I actually think that this could be a really productive professional pathway. One of the things that I'm actually quite interested in is that, as I say, there's been so many little things that have come up in your talk that I think would be really useful to flesh out quite
Mhm.
systematically. And if I can just mention a couple.
Please,
Yeah.
please.
So the first thing is, what you've got is a constellation shift.
Mhm.
So at the beginning, they were focusing on this issue, this issue, this issue, that issue. And at the end, they were focusing on completely different topics. So, what you can do is just take one content, one topic, one of your themes, whether it's classroom management or whether it's learner differentiation. And like there was hardly anything here at the beginning. And when they did speak about it, they spoke in very prosaic ways. But
Mhm.
later on, these, we saw a lot more, you know, movement into the worldly code and. So, in other words,
Mhm.
here, what you've done in this presentation is you have said there was this kind of pathway, there was that kind of pathway, there was that kind of pathway. And so, what I think would be another way to take this forward and to, just kind of mine your data is to do a
Yeah.
thematic. So, how were they speaking about classroom management at the beginning? And how were they speaking about classroom management at the end?
Mhm.
How were they speaking about learner differentiation at the beginning? How were they speaking about learner differentiation at the end?
Yeah.
So do it thematically. That would be one way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Another way that's come up over and over and over again is the role of the facilitator. What did you call
Yeah.
them, Daniel? Teacher,
Pedagogical advisor.
Medical
Pedagogical
advisor.
advisor.
pedagogical advisors, and the role of the student. Now, I'm thinking about there have been three studies that are quite interesting in this respect. One is Anna Vera's study. One
Mhm.
is Zahira's Gina Asfat's study, and another one was Cecily Bez, Betzer. And what they did was they looked at who was making those shifts. So which ones were, and they, either used a different, like a different color or a square or a different shade of gray or whatever, but which shifts where were the students placing themselves? And then where were the advisors taking them to, or where were their peers taking them to? And then you can start tracking not just the movements,
Right.
but at the beginning, is it the advisor that's making a lot of those shifts to the worldly
Right.
code? And later on, are the students themselves, either themselves or their peers, moving towards stronger semantic density? So I think that that could also be something that you might want to revisit your data and
Hmm.
just look at other opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the other questions we
Thank
had
you.
over and
Wow, these
over
are very
again.
good ideas.
Yes,
Sorry,
great. We've
Daniel.
written, both of us, I see have written them down. I see both of us taking notes at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we were actually fascinated, especially by the role of the pedagogical. First of all, I completely agree that the themes that were discussed are strongly related to the waves, for sure. We cannot really analyze them without considering the themes themselves. And Daniel and I were really fascinated by the role of the pedagogical advisor when we analyze the data. And that gets me to think a lot about, now teacher training now with the AI, and we move a lot towards online teaching, etc., and independent learning. So it would be very interesting to see and to examine this in light of the current situation, I would say, the current mode of instruction. Um, I wonder what it's like in other countries. Is it also online most of the time or part of the time? I'm talking about like teacher training.
Mostly face-to-face modes for these kinds of things.
Maybe I was
I,
misunderstood.
can
I
I
was
just make
asking.
Yeah.
sorry, I don't have an answer to that question, but it was just a related comment or question. Just remembering back to Dale's talk a couple of weeks ago and Lee's own work. I know that 'cause going back to so you mentioned that the pedagogic advisors were in this kind of important mediating role, and some of Dale and Lee's work shows how sort of engineering in prompts helps
Yes.
students to wave up, as it were, and to get into more theoretical territory. Um, and oh, what's her name? Diane Swift in the UK. She did some work in teacher education that was also around the dialogic nature of feedback and professional learning and so on. And she's looked at how the kinds of questions that teacher educators ask can help steer the conversation up or down. So I just wonder, I mean, it's sort of, suppose, partly a question, partly a suggestion, I suppose, that semantics itself could be used as a teacher educator education
Mhm.
tool
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
to have the mediators themselves think, that sort of reflection in action, um, where they're having the conversation. If they're feeling that it's very concrete and that or that it's very prosaic or whatever, and they're wanting to shift the conversation more towards theory, more towards the classroom or wherever it might be, then having the semantic wave or the semantic plane in mind as a teacher educator tool could also be quite powerful for thinking about how you then craft your questions to help shift the conversation into the spaces that perhaps the teachers were not already in. So I mean, obviously that's both a practical thing that could be used in teacher education settings, but also something that you could go back. I mean, Lee's essentially already made the point, but you could go back and look at the data and see the role of the mediator. So that was just a thought. The other thought, I put it in the chat, but just for us, I mean, as Lee said, this is really fascinating, and it feels like there's such um, rich things here to mine. But the analysis itself, because we didn't have access to excerpts from the dialogue or from what the teachers or the advisors were actually saying. I actually, because this is not my world, obviously, so the presentation itself is quite SG minus, whereas a couple of examples of data, if you put little quotes on the quadrants on the screen, or gave us extracts first before you then gave us the analysis, that would give us the little kind of, start low, start concrete with examples of data, and then wave up to the analysis. I'm not an expert here, so that would make it easier for me to follow. So that was just a additional thought.
Thank you. No, you're
Thank
right.
you.
You're right. We kept thinking about that and thought, should we just do it in a handout and let everybody read through it or not, or actually do, but Dale did a really nice job of that last time, actually, where she put some up on the quadrant, something to use. And also what she talked about was, which was very nice, was that the teacher, the students themselves had to analyze their reflections with the plane. So we can, you have the common language between the facilitator and the student kind of looking, okay, now let's reflect on your reflection.
And that's possibly
Totally.
something for the future, right? I mean, I haven't done it for a long time, but in doing teacher observations, in an academic literacy education context, I've sat with the teacher and then live profiled their class afterwards and said, this is what you did, or this is what you didn't do, and then used the wave as then a mediator of a conversation about how the class could be otherwise next time, and so on. So you can bring these tools actually in explicitly with the teachers.
Absolutely. And one other final question we have, and it comes back to the why didn't anything, go beyond the SD, the SG, the lower semantic gravity. And we kept asking ourselves over and over again, is this valuable? Was there learning going on? Okay, it's not the classic wave of what we've been seeing in the articles, but yes, there was some learning going on here. What kind was it? And is that maybe appropriate for this specific kind of subject? Maybe, when you're discussing, something specific, language teaching, et cetera, this actually works. Whereas if it were, classroom behavior or classroom management, maybe something else would be more productive. So we kept asking ourselves, what is valuable? What here, we knew movement was valuable. We knew, movement is valuable, but what kind of movement and in what cases? And that's also an interesting question, because I don't think that everything is, has to look like a wave going up and down, and we've seen so many in all the different articles, the different kinds of waves and what's going on. So that's another question for us as well, I think.
Daniel, I think that that's the key, is what is fit for purpose here in this context, in this course, in this activity, because
Exactly.
it's not you might not want them to go off on a theoretical tangent. You might want them to stay very focused on the school, but do it in a much more, like what you've got here is a much more complex, much more sophisticated way. And that's fit for purpose for certain aspects. So I think that fit for purpose is the key. But thank you very, very much, both of you, for sharing your work. I think that you've got some ideas of how maybe you could, mine differently, because I think that that's the joy of this kind of thing, is that the data's rich, and one analysis is a start, but there's so much more. There's layers that you can unpack. So we've certainly walked away with something really useful. I hope you have too, through the process of presenting
Thank you.
this.
Thank you. Your comments have been so useful. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to get to know you. Really wonderful.
Likewise.
I bragged. I said, Orly, you're going to love them. It's such a nice group. I mean, there's so many groups out there. We all have been in, and this is always such a nice group to work with.
Yeah.
I
I think
By
that
the
the
way,
big thing is that the success of one of us is the success of all of us, and nobody's in competition here. We're trying to build a field. We're trying to, you know, and I think that that's yeah. It kind of there's not an academic arrogance that we're trying to like let's go together. Let's go on this journey. Let's go together. Um, and I think that that is what truly makes the space very different from many others that I've been in. So,
Yeah.
sorry, Orly, you were about to say.
I'm saying that I'm going to ERA. I don't know if you're familiar
Yes.
with ERA in Belgrade next week. Well, I was wondering whether any of you is going there
I
or is
know
attending that conference.
Carol Bertram will be there. Carol Bertram is a professor of teacher education in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. She will be there. So do look out for her. I'll put her email address in the chat for you as well. She's
Thank you.
she's very, very worth hooking up with while you're there and just making that contact. She's also like you very, very much in terms of teacher knowledge and how do we get the students to use that teacher knowledge. So I think that you will find meeting her very useful. All
Thank
right,
you.
everybody. AC.za there, and it's I'm just going to write her name, Carol Bertram, Professor Carol Bertram. Well, in 2 weeks' time is the next round table. So looking forward to seeing you all again, and thank you, Daniel and Orly, for a very fascinating morning. And I really do appreciate everybody being here. And I'm so glad to be back in this space. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you
We are
soon.
too.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye
Daniel.
bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Ollie.
you.
Thanks,
Bye
Lee.
bye.
Bye bye.
Take care.